Welcome, everybody. I just realized I played a sound and you didn't even hear it. We'll try that again. It's my new intro sound. It's still not working. Okay. Perfect. All right. All right, let's get this started. Again, for those of you that can't read, or I can't point, I can't. I can never do this right. Anyway, my name is DJ Eshelman. Good to be with you today. And so I think what I'm going to do is get some things up in the background here while I'm kind of chatting here. This is the beauty of live is that you are sometimes permitted to do little things like that. So while it's up there, I just want to mention that LinkedIn is absolutely your source, especially for these broadcasts. The main reason why is that LinkedIn has a way to do events that you can not only let me know you're coming, get any updates about it, but also probably some more importantly, is a little thing on there that says add to calendar. And so that is why I encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn and watch for those events as they're coming up. We'll have some other opportunities coming up here. I'm kind of revamping the way all this is done around here with me. So there's some interesting things coming with that for sure. But for the time being, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. But actually, first, let's get a review of last week. So I am, of course, recording all these mostly for being able to participate live. So if anybody has any questions or like that, they can do so. But also to get a recording of this, so I can edit it down later and get all these awkward little things out of there. so, so to review from last week, we were talking about why is the big thing about last week is we were talking about why it's important to think about goals and um, why it's important to think in terms of your life in terms of controlling it, and that is why we're going to talk about that stuff today. But the general takeaway, hopefully, if you did some homework with last week's, is to get to the point where you were writing down why you do things. So in these current series, I'm really focused on people that are in information technology services. So this is actually a harder question for some of you to answer. So the key is to say, okay, why do I do work? And usually it's like, well, DJ, you're just being obvious and facetious. No, I'm not. I'm actually asking you to stop what you're doing and ask yourself why you're doing work. Because if you don't have a good handle on that, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but you will just be basically a victim to that work. And so that's something that I want to avoid for everyone I know, basically. And I don't include people I don't know personally, like those of you that might be watching. So I guess I just extend that universally in that regards. So I'm going to um, pull up something on the background here. Give me just a moment. I do apologize. Um, a little later on, we're going to try a whiteboarding activity, and I realized that I didn't have the right. I'm using Microsoft's whiteboard, and I didn't have the right account pulled up, so I do apologize for that. Uh, there we go. Okay, so apologies. Let's get on with the show. So today we are talking about taking control of the present, so you can. I'll try that again. This time with clarity. Taking control of your present so that you can rule the future. So I just instinctively pointed at my year plan there, so that's kind of brilliant. But in any case, I do want to say that if you have any questions along the way here, feel free to add them to the various comments in the various places we're streaming, and I will try and review those towards the end of the next episode, that sort of thing. Or if you're watching this way after the fact, hopefully you can connect with me in another way, like Twitter or LinkedIn, and send me a message there. Again, I'll put this message up here, the LinkedIn follow thing. That's linked.in/in DJ Eshelman to follow me on LinkedIn. And so I highly recommend that. That's kind of my go-to embassy this year while we do some repair work on our main platform. So definitely do that. So if you have any questions, feel free to follow me there. I am trying to figure out a time to do a live Q&A that everyone or more people will be able to attend. That is a bit of a challenge. I have a lot of folks that I'm connected to across the entire globe. And so it's hard to coordinate sometimes with that sort of things. But if that's something you're interested in, please let me know. And maybe you can determine the schedule for me, and I'll just, you know, blame you if it was the bad choice. I'm kidding. So anyway, let's get started with this. So this week, or I should say, in this episode, really, we're going to talk about how to take control. So the first thing first, I want to define what being in control looks like, because this is something where I find a lot of people have hangups about the words control. And I wanted to be very clear about what I mean. You know, I don't want you to get all mad at me about whatever. I want to be very clear about what in control means. And it's really comes down to, for me, as simple as I don't want to be a victim. I don't. I don't want to have a life where everything is done, to me. I want life to happen for me. I want to be a victor over circumstances, not be ruled by them. Now, that sounds dramatic, but I will tell you this. I've been visiting folks in the IT world literally all over the world, pretty much. Mostly in a certain swath that, North America, South America, but I have heard the same basic things from the majority of the people there, as well as even some people in Europe that I've been talking to in the last year or so. And what I seem to hear more and more of is that people that are in IT services feel that they are victims to their circumstances, which to me is an utter tragedy. I don't think you should feel like you are a victim to anything, much less something that's you're choosing to be at that's paying you money, right? That's really not healthy. Now, a lot of people think because you're being paid, that's inevitable. In fact, I got into an argument recently with someone. Can't call it a discussion because that got too heated for that. They started to take things personally, but I mean, I won. I can say that I'm the one recording, but the honest truth was there's no winners in that. It's like another Stephen Covey concept of there was not a win-win scenario. That was a lose win, or maybe even a lose lose. I don't know. But the discussion went something like this: me saying, I think that even when you're at work, you should be able to be a victor in those circumstances. You don't have to be a victim to your work. You can actually own that reasons why to work and things like that. And this person was very much like, no, you just show up and you get paid. You're not paid to own it. You're paid to just get paid, or you're paid to work, I should say. So I want you to understand the distinction and understand that there's a lot of people out there that think this way, and I really don't want you to be one of them. I'll just be blunt. I want you to be a victor over these circumstances, no matter what they are. I can do the same thing in life. We can go all day on this, but I'm not going to. I want to there's a lot of stuff we're getting to today, so I don't want to bog us down too much with that. But this is probably one of the most crucial things to understand to get everything else today, is to really nail down, do you want to be a victim of your boss, of your calendar, of your status, whatever it is, you have to decide whether you are going to be a victim of that or not. Okay. So that's the first thing. Another thing about control that I want to pull up is that there is a kind of an axiom here where being accountable is attractive. And I don't mean in a, physical attractiveness kind of a thing. I just pointed at myself, which is highly inappropriate in that scenario, but that's okay. I think my level of accountability and my willingness to take things on and be responsible for them has been a hallmark of my career. I've said this before. If you've seen this in other Thrive casts, and I've said these kind of things, I mean it. There's a level of me learning where it's like I wasn't being paid to know all the stuff. I was getting paid to take responsibility to go find the answers. That level of accountability is attractive. If I was somebody who just said, no, I don't know that, I'm not getting paid to know that, it's not on my job description, go find someone else who can. That's not very attractive to somebody who's leading a team, or especially anybody who's hiring in that team. These are not attractive qualities, and they're certainly not going to tell you or tell others about you that sort of way. They're going to speak well of you You're going to actually have a reputation, whether you know it or not, of someone who should not be depended on if that is your mindset. But if you are accountable to things that even don't necessarily have any consequence to you one way or the other, if you can be accountable for things like that, that is very attractive to those making the decisions in those circumstances. So, in other words, if you want a surefire way to get ahead in pretty much any job in the world, show accountability, and that is attractive. Now, there's another word about control that sometimes gets confusing for folks, and that is if control is like me pressing down on someone else. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about domineering. Domineering is ugly. We don't like ugly. We don't want to. I don't want you to say that, I'm in control of my life and therefore I'm in control of somebody else's life. Or a lot of you out here that are probably maybe listening to this might be a more of a managerial role, and you haven't been really trained in how to do that properly. You just got promoted. And let's be honest here. A lot of your team probably hates you and you don't know why. And the reason is because you've never learned the difference between leadership and managing and just straight up domineering. Where you're just bringing people the wrong way, your way of the highway. That's domineering. Okay. And that's ugly. What I want you to show to people and to yourself, to whoever you're, with in life, whoever it is, self control. Self control. That is dominating your own thoughts in that regards. The only person you're oppressing is yourself, and you're not doing it in a way that depresses you. You are doing it in a way that moves you forward. That pushes your boundaries a bit. We're going to talk about discomfort at a later time, but I talked about it a little bit last week actually in our first session about a certain level of discomfort being necessary to move forward, and that's a good why to set for goals. We'll get into that later on, but anyway, the point here is that being in control of your life and being in control of your present, you have to be someone who is willing to take that responsibility and self-control. Now, here's the rub. A lot of you might be saying to yourself, well, DJ, that sounds great, but I've always got people coming by my desk, giving me stuff to do, or sending me an email or a trouble ticket. Where's my control in that? How am I showing self-control in those kind of things? And believe me when I tell you, you're doing so in ways you probably don't even realize. Let me break that down a little bit. And we're going to dive. Actually, this is probably going to be the theme for our entire big chunk of our episode here. So bear with me. A big piece of self-control is knowing that you choose to be there. You choose to act. Now, there are consequences if you don't sometimes, right? If you get a trouble ticket that's assigned to you, for example, if that's your role and you don't act on it. Yeah, there's some potential circumstances there, right? But if you own that and do some of the things we're trying to talk about today to put that into its appropriate place and communicate proactively, all these kind of things, well, then now all of a sudden you are exerting self-control and choosing to do something because of your why. If your why is just to make money, I got news for you. It's going to be really difficult for you to not be a victim in a circumstance like that. If the only reason you're doing work is just to get by, that's something that really should be temporary. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, I've done plenty of work in my life where it's really just to get by or just to make some money while I work on other things. I mean, as much as I love consulting work, I can even say that at this point now, where it's like I know there's things I could be doing that are far more valuable to people in that regards. It's just a matter of whether it pays anything or not. So this advice might be valuable, but you're not paying anything for it. Actually, if you are paying anything for this advice, maybe we should have a conversation. I might be getting ripped off by somebody claiming to be me or something, because this is free material. So yeah, that aside, my point is that you want to be in control of those things, even when they are just things that pop up, and you can realize that your willingness to do them or not do them is a choice, and it's a choice you can make. And whether you choose to do them or not do them makes you a victor over that. Now, there are circumstances in life. There are. Oh, sorry, say that again. There are consequences to choices, either good or bad. So when we talk about what we're going to talk about later on, I want you to keep that in mind as well, is that we are going to talk in terms of the consequence or result, might be a better way to say it, of each of the choices we make and where we put things in our day-to-day structure. So let's first talk about well, the book that I've been it's this was not on purpose. Um, but I've been talking in talking about distractions and things like that. This is the kind of my thing with this series to start it off with. I wanted to talk about this topic of okay, what about when you want to set goals, but they're not your goals to set? Or what about when you want to set goals, but you're being constantly interrupted by other priorities and you feel overwhelmed by them? And so I'm going to generally refer to those as distractions because unless they're put into a specific bucket, then that's what they are. So I will kind of clue you in on some ways to categorize that here very momentarily. But what I wanted to say about that is, especially in IT services, I tend to deal a lot more with these things that pop up because that's honest. That's part of the job, right? That's really kind of what most of us signed up for. I mean, even me as a contract consultant, I mean, I have my phone on silent at night. If you're the only people that can break through that are the people that I've specifically allowed, and that would be my wife and one close friend and my pastor. That's it. Those are the only people that I can actually get through that block, and that's literally true. I'm not going to show you on my phone, but it's true. So the thing is, like, getting to that point is one of the things that I wanted to share with you later on. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of go into detail later. I want it to sink in and then get there later on. But the bottom line is that we do have a lot of things that become very distracting um, in IT work, right? So there's a way to go about this, and so that's what we're going to talk about. Pardon me. Okay, so in his book, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, which I just happened to be listening to at the gym. I don't know how this happened. Maybe it's a subconscious thing that I knew I was going to be talking about this, and so I wanted to go over this. It wasn't a conscious decision that I made, but there was something that came up in my listening on Friday or Saturday, I think it was, that I thought was absolutely brilliant. I think it was Saturday. Um, and that was the concept of there's four quadrants we're going to go over. So I wanted to go through this with you. So here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to take a little exercise here. And let me put this up on the screen. So we're going to use a product I've been using called Presearch. I'll link somewhere else. For some reason, I couldn't figure out to get it showing up on the screen today, but whatever. We'll get you a link, or you can just scan this QR code that is up on the screen if you're viewing this live. But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to this tool here called Presearch. And what Presearch is doing is it just sits in front of various search engines like Google, YouTube, DuckDuckGo. You can select specific ones, but what it does is it'll aggregate results as it feels are appropriate for the keyword. But the key here is that it's not invading your privacy. In other words, it's not reporting back to the search engines who you are and what you're searching for, which for me is great because I do a lot of searching. I need to figure this out how many times I hit search in a single day. I would be very willing to say it's well between 50 and 100 times a day easily. So this is a tool that I use for that. And let's do an example here. So we'll go Stephen Covey, four quadrants. And I chose something really easy to spell here. So a couple of things about this. One is you can add this to your default, which it already is. I don't know why it's showing up, but um, I'll give you a preview of an upcoming feature. How's that? So this is an AI result that got typed out as we were uh, looking at this. So this is from ChatGPT on the background. Is some things are happening. It's not ChatGPT, you know what I mean? It's like the OpenAI framework that there's a few of us that have access to within Presearch. So it's actually searching that without giving any information out. And so you can anonymously search in that OpenAI framework and have certain results show up. And it just so happens that looking at this is a great way to describe these. And so I'm going to go through these pretty soon here. But let's actually, I think we'll just do that right now as we'll do these quadrants. But let's see some images here, maybe. I think this is mostly just Google Images, but you know what? I like these. Let's see. I think these are ones I've seen before, but I'm just going to focus on this one here. That's very hard to read. Okay, there we go. So let's talk through this a little bit. So, as far as what Stephen Covey has in his four quadrants, he's saying, okay, when, oh boy, apologies, spam bot. Uh, it happens to us all, right? So let's block that. Yeah, yeah. My bots don't block the bots. Apparently, that's okay. It happens, right? I think it was from Twitch. So at least we're live on Twitch. Anyway, so let's get into this. So basically, what Stephen Covey wants us to do is assign everything a priority. And we do this by having four different quadrants that we're putting things in. That's an exercise we're going to do later on here. So what this is going to look like is a bunch of key areas here, and let's call them quadrants. And so I can go over here. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, just various quadrants that are here. And you're going to want to separate out the task you're doing into these quadrants. And there's some nuances here, of course, about that. So what you're going to look at here is, for example, let's start with quadrant 1, which is kind of some of the more common for IT work. And so that would be things you're going to manage. And these are titles that are just out here. That's why I like this particular slide, is because I've heard these kind of titles before. They're not necessarily what Stephen Covey has in his book, but they describe things pretty well. So quadrant 1 on your upper left hand corner. Oh, you know what? I forgot something here. Let me back up a second. Let's see if I can do this here. So I want to actually build up a part of this. Hopefully, it's not too hard to see on smaller screens, but basically, on the upper left-hand corner of the 4, you'll have quadrant 1, which is a. Maybe I'm describing this badly. Ooh, man, I am not doing well with this today. Should have had something more formal, I guess, instead of being on impromptu. So that's my bad. So here's what I want to do. So on the sides of your graph, on the horizontal section, on the those two, you want to label the first important and the one underneath that not important. Okay. And then in the very top section, you want to label the one on the left as urgent and the one on the right as not urgent. And yeah, and again, this is the kind of the English standard way of doing these kind of things. So if it works better for you to do this in a different format, if you are in a different nation that writes from right to left, feel free to do that. It doesn't really matter as long as we got the quadrants in their kind of order in the right way. So for us, we'll just for the purposes of this example, just because what Stephen Covey kind of uses most frequently, we'll just do it this way. So quadrant 1 is urgent and important. Okay, so these are things that we like I said, very often deal with in information technology, where we have things that maybe are a bit of a crisis, that are relevant. I'm not talking about irrelevant crises. We're going to get into that in a minute because it's actually one of the bad ones. But anyway, so these are areas that are well, let's say they're problems that are based on a deadline a lot of times, or there's something that has come up that is a genuine thing that we need to stop what we're doing and focus on. But anyway, these are the things that have the most powerful ability to interrupt what you're doing. And so you really want to do your best to manage these. And so let me pull that other one back up again here. So these are things that you really want to um, identify if it's for you to be doing, if you are the best resource for this or not. Pardon me. If you are in IT services and you are in an organization where there's the ability to escalate a problem like this sort of thing, and you're not the best resource for it, it's good to be honest about that. It's good to be able to say, you know what, if this is this important and I don't have this information right away, a lot of times I'll give myself, depending on the agreement there, we'll talk about here in a little bit. I'll give myself maybe 10 to 15 minutes to figure something out. And if I don't have a solution in that amount of time, then I'm going to start looking to delegate that to someone else. Whether that's someone up the chain in my company, or starting a support ticket with a vendor, whatever that looks like. I think the most effective way to handle these kind of challenges is to do everything you can to delegate all these things that happen in quadrant one as much as you can. If you are someone who has an assistant, for example, there's a lot of these things that can be very, very important for the business, and you may not have the direct skill set or the gifting to handle those kind of things, but it's on your lap right now. What do you do? Well, that's where having an assistant can sometimes come into play there, of saying, how can I get this off to someone else, and do that. So, um, in any case, that is kind of the thought on that. So any kind of day to day things that are preventing you from working on your main goals, that would be manage that section in the top left corner of this quadrant one. Let's move on to, actually, I'm going to do this in kind of a weird order, and I kind of apologize in advance for that. We're going to head down over to a quadrant it's really, probably one of the most devastating in information technology, and that is quadrant three. So quadrant three is things that are important but not urgent. Or sorry, I said that wrong. Urgent but not important. Oh my gosh. Okay, so quadrant three, urgent, not important. So these are things that, are those drive-by tasks that you just kind of end up with, that just don't have any consideration of you being the right person to do them. These kind of things that don't really have any direct benefit. Maybe this is for one person that's complaining louder than others. That whole concept of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but it's not an appropriate thing to do. If you've ever read the Phoenix Project, this is you'll have seen this in action a lot, to where somebody complains loudly and the person drops what they're doing to go fix that. And I see that all the time still, to this day. And yeah, it's hard to deal with, but this is a strategy, just kind of one of those soft skills that nobody's teaching you how to do. That's why I'm doing this. But really, it is some things where it's just like you can be convinced of a priority that's not there within this quadrant. When you get done with something and find, you know what, that wasn't, all I did was take away time from other important things. It wasn't really something that I should have been doing. It was just loud. Um, and especially when things are not your worry. This is actually another thing that I do find a lot. Um, when people are not enjoying the activity that they're doing, because they don't like it, but it is their responsibility to do. They're the ones that need to be doing it. It's what we'll call a quadrant two activity here, and soon some of those times they can be like boring, or just not what you want to be doing, and so you will unintentionally start working on other people's work, or stuff that's not as important at the moment, because it's right there in front of you, and it's new and exciting, and it's like, okay, yeah, great, I'll do that right now. So you can get caught into a pattern of doing these kind of things, right? So it does happen. Now, what I'll say about this is that in information technology, sometimes it's hard to have the, I guess, agency to always be able to combat this. You need management help, and this is where we're going to talk in a little bit about agreements with your management, and we're going to talk about how to formulate those, and have it to where it's not your responsibility to reject things that shouldn't be in your daily life. These quadrant three activities, doing everything you can to get away from these, because you know what, the reality is, quadrant three is where more money of the company is wasted. And this sounds weird, because what we're going to talk about next is quadrant four, which is in the bottom right hand corner. And this are things that are not important and not urgent. Now, you would maybe think to yourself, okay, how in the world, DJ, is it that a not important and not urgent task could be more valuable to a company. And that is because a lot of these kind of things in terms of time management and priority can still be very important. Um, Watching episodes of Thrivecast, for example, a very good way to learn more about the people in information technology, and it benefits you, right? So that's something that can be a valuable task. Going off to conferences, doing things like um, learning. There's we're gonna hopefully if there's time today, we'll talk about kind of some practical application, how I put this into work in my own life as far as getting ready for this course and balancing that among other things that I'm doing. I'll give you some practical examples. Right. So, but anyway, there's certain things like that where you are learning new things that benefit yourself and your company. And so it's not that those are not without value, but they can't be done if you're chasing after things that aren't really, stuff that you could be doing best at. And somebody else could be doing better than you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It really does um, uh, come into a lot of different things. But basically, if you can't delegate it, can't eliminate it, and you're stuck with it, that is an unideal situation. So that's something to be aware of. But you want to try and avoid this quadrant quadrant three activities and get into quadrant four if necessary. We'll talk about quadrant two in here in a second, but I also want to talk about the importance of entertainment and rest. Things that are there to just kind of minimize the amount of stress you have, that sort of thing. Trying to remember how to do. Sorry, I'm trying to recall how to do something here without stealing things completely away. It has been a while since I've used this interface, so I do apologize for that. I think it's like that. There we go. I wanted to get my face on the screen for a change, and not be focused on the quadrants for a little bit. I'll just keep that on the low there. Sorry. So anyway, as far as quadrant four activities, uh, there is a need that we have to relax. I'm going to give you an example of this. I actually was intending to do some consulting documentation work this weekend, and it got to sometimes Saturday. I'd just gotten back from the gym, and I was just taking a little bit of a rest, and I took a kind of a mental inventory, and I was saying, do I need a little bit of rest time, or some people will call it a Sabbath time? And I said to myself, you know what? As much as I hate to admit it, yes, I do. I need some rest time, and so I was like, I can push off these tasks to another time. It's safe to do so. Let's do so. And so on a day where I didn't have anything that was urgent for me to do, I had some things that were important to do, but they weren't really pressing. And so there were some things that I could essentially just say, you know what, they're not going to be swept off the table completely, but they are something that I need some rest to better myself for that. And so I literally took the day on Saturday and just watched History Channel shows. I just did like a bunch of the men who built America and the food that built America. Just looking back on these kind of historical things and learning and just being down, not worrying about things and just going through that process. So that made me rested and ready for the rest of this week. So here I am, uh, doing one of my quadrant two activities with you. So let's talk about that. Quadrant two. This is what we often call the focus quadrant. And this is where you really want to have as much activity as possible, because this, though it may seem contrary to popular belief, I think everybody often, when they look at this, thinks that, um, the quadrant one is where everything should be, but that's not true. It's for a number of reasons. But number two, quadrant two, the top left, or sorry, top right hand corner. Why can't I get these things right today? It's one of those weird days and too much caffeine, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, so the top right hand corner is the quadrant two activities. So these will be things you need to consider as not urgent, but they are important. And so these are where projects come in. These are where um, really high level things that are going on tend to be worked on. So we'll get into this when it comes to our goal setting and smarter goals later this week. But this is where those kind of things live. This is where you are mentally switched on. We're going to do some things like being able to put on like Brain FM, things like that, to be able to focus. The things like that are really crucial for this, right? So being able to have that level of focus is important for these kind of things. It's also important for relationships. If you can spend more time in quadrant two with your relationships, where you are focused in on that person, like my wife and I, for example, we will make some time set aside that we are doing nothing but being with each other, and that there's no other things we're doing necessarily, at least not that are stealing our focus away from each other. It's activities to do. It doesn't necessarily mean we're not focused on each other as building that relationship. So important kind of things, right? Um, and then there's also a word I'm going to use here that we're going to talk about next, or actually not quite next, but after next. And that is the concept of being proactive. So the thing I like about quadrant two is that it's not reactive stuff. It's very much proactive. So whereas quadrant one is incredibly reactive, quadrant two is very much proactive. And so it's a very empowering difference. And actually, going back to what we started this conversation about being in control, is that frankly, what I see more often than not in information technology, especially, is those that are constantly in that kind of reactive mode are are very much feeling like a victim, and those that are very much in the proactive mode very much feeling control of their lives and their professional lives especially. And so I really do want you to be more proactive. That's what we're going to talk about in not this next section, but the one right after it. So hopefully that's good for y'all, and you understand the quadrants, the way they work. The best way to go about this is to practice. So we'll get into that here in a few moments, but also in terms of reading the book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It's good to like go through. Actually, I think I have it both in Kindle format and audiobook format, and I'm starting to realize that neither of them are quite right for me. I need to actually have a physical book I'm holding in my hand. So that's on my list to go grab one of those at some point. But it's been around for a long time. It's been a couple of revisions, and obviously it's kind of the one of the gold standards in not only productivity but just in generally being a well-rounded person, not just professionally. So anyway, there's that. So highly recommend that. But let's talk a little bit about the next phase of this, of understanding all these kind of things to take control of our present, to dominate or rule our future. And that is what gets scheduled. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. See me jumping ahead? Did you see that? Man. Agreements versus expectations. Those of you that have ever been in coaching with me have heard this. I've also talked about it on a couple of live broadcasts over time. And this is a concept that is actually fairly simple, but oftentimes harder to execute, um, especially in information technology. This happens daily, where you will have people that have a set of expectations over here, right? So you'll have people that are saying, "Okay, we want this, want this," and you're saying, "I want this, want this," or whatever, and ne'er the two shall meet, right? It's not always working like you think it is, or a lot of times they will say things over here, and you will hear something different over here. That does happen. So if there's a miss there, and the expectations here and what you're actually executing on over here end up being different, then there's conflict, right? And then there's strife and firings and the like. So let's try and avoid all that. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on causing an agreement to happen between all of those. Okay. So we're going to actually look to make sure that we're all on the same page, so to speak. On the same page, please hear that that's a thing we use all the time, and we need to make literal. Okay. I'm saying that we need to get into better habit about actually writing down, sometimes on a piece of paper, what that agreement actually is between what we're doing, even in simple little things. It can be, I work in a lot of Citrix technologies, right? So for me, there's a lot of ways to do things and a lot of things that can be configured. And I've seen way too many people come in and just, basically deploy the white paper. And so whatever they saw online or whatever, they just deploy that and think that's going to be good enough for their users. And when there's not, then there's just tension there. In the book I'm writing, I'm actually taking a suggestion from an event that happened in real life to someone, and I'm not going to say who. If they're watching, that they know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's going to be a character in the book called Peter. Peter is going to be a paper tiger who basically, goes out and get a certification, but doesn't really know what he's doing as far as designing things for actual use cases and that sort of thing, which is very important because if you have the knowledge, that's one thing. Having the application of that knowledge is the other thing, right? So it's not just about knowing how the technology works. It's about intimately knowing what the users need so they can actually get that technology deployed correctly to meet those needs. So that's where writing things down really comes important, because now it's not just an expectation on either side, it's an agreement between both sides where everybody's talking about the same thing. So that's why the expression "get on the same page" literally means, hey, you know what, we're both looking at the exact same thing here, and we're calling out if there's anything wrong so we can correct what's on the page. Okay, this is much more important even in small little things. And so when it comes to those things that pop up every day, these are where service level agreements come into play. For example, you might have something that's like, okay, let's say it's something where somebody's saying, I can't print every day. So, but it's one of those things that's like, okay, is this one person that can't print, or is this many people that can't print? That kind of determines an impact of area, right? What needs to be printed? That creates a level of impact. And so with that, we can say, okay, how does that fit into our SLA structure? Is it something where I need to create an incident and take care of it right away, make this into a quadrant one kind of a thing? Or is it something where I need to treat this as less important, where it's might be urgent and loud, but it's much more of a quadrant three level of activity. SLAs are a lot of times well written SLAs, or anyway, done in such a way that helps you just get right into that agreement. So you're not working on expectations. Every user that has a problem has the same expectation, right? What is it? Fix it. They don't care about how many other people are having the problem or what you're doing right now. They just want it fixed. So if you let them delegate it, they will say it's a absolute, quadrant one. Well, actually, sometimes they might even make other claims, but you know what I mean? It's like you don't want it to be outside of those agreements. Otherwise, you will get into that point of drama with trying to manage these things. So being able to define those clearly in your whole entire team is crucial. If your organization is not using SLAs, if your company is not having these things defined, then I would highly suggest starting that conversation. I mean, okay, so in for those of you that have it, my book Just Do This. I think this is in. Oh, see, I'm prepared here. So this here it is. If you have a paperback, it's on page 241. So this is the heading is service level agreements. So we're talking about the whole entire service desk in the maintain phase there. So it is chapter 25. So chapter 25 of Just Do This has more information on that. So you can read up on that if you want detail about, severity, resolution time frame, all that kind of stuff. That's where you can find that. I should have had the hardcover up here so I can tell you the page number on that. I apologize. I'm prepared. They're busy hanging on the wall over here. So anyway, in terms of that, that's really important to get that all agreed upon, so we're not in that area of disagreement, or we're doing things that end up quadrant three activities that we shouldn't be doing. Okay, let's talk about the next thing. And I talked about this as being really important when it comes to the difference between quadrant one and quadrant two. Whereas quadrant one is very reactive, quadrant two is very proactive. And This I talk about a lot because I know this to be a fact, is that if you can be more proactive, pardon me, you can be more proactive in information technology, you will reduce your stress. If you can be more proactive in information, really, Deej? Let's try that again. If you can be more proactive in information technology, you will reduce your level of stress. It is just literally true. So if you can know about a problem before any other people do, and you can start working on that and inform the right people ahead of that, you can keep that from becoming a misbalanced part of the equation here, where you have a bunch of people breathing down your throat. If you are already working on something and already have a plan, that makes everyone feel better about it. I mean, how many times have we said, oh, this is down, I wonder what's going on, and I look at the status page and say, oh yes, this is not only down but they're working on it. That makes me feel a lot less upset. And there might be consequences to that, that sort of thing. Those things do happen, right? But at the same time, I don't feel as much a victim because I know somebody's working on it. And conversely, from the other side of that, is that you don't feel as much a victim to those requests because the requests just stop coming in. And say, oh, I'm already working. Somebody's already working on that. I'm just going to let it go. So you don't get overwhelmed with having to categorize a bunch of things that are coming in, right? There might be nuances of things that are coming on that are important to know, but a lot of times you can lump those together and be appropriate in how to do this. We're going to talk towards the end of our program here about how to categorize all this stuff and get in a practice of that and get better and better about putting these things into the right quadrants. It's a life skill that you absolutely need, in my opinion. But the key here is to get proactive about things as much as you possibly can, because that is a way you can take ownership of that. Or if you like, extreme ownership of that, if you want to get into that level of acumen, I guess you could say. Woo, big words. The bottom line is that I want you to be someone who is not sitting there waiting for things to happen to you. I want you to be someone who is taking action on your environment and doing things that will let you know about problems before anybody else knows about them, so you can be way ahead and really be the hero of that scenario. I always think of Star Trek, right? I always think of how many times did the Captain Picard call down to engineering, and Geordi's like, well, maybe not like that, but he's like, yeah, I'm on it, Captain. We literally hear that kind of dialogue, right? Because there's systems going off and they know what the problem is, and the call for support is like, yeah, okay, yeah, we're on it, and here's our plan, that sort of thing. And obviously dialogue there, but the point is that I want to be more like Jordy in that regards. I want to have the advanced knowledge that something is going on and I'm already in progress before anybody even knows it's a problem. So anyway, that's proactive versus reactive. We can get into that with another time. um, there is a question here I want to put up here. Let me remember how to do that. All right. Question is, in regards to disagreements, so we're going back to the agreements versus expectations. What do you do if you sense that an employee seems like they'll quit on the spot? And this is a hard one to really nail down because it's so circumstantial. But honestly, there's a level of, is it your responsibility to assure that they will stay with the job? A lot of times, there's that expression, the straw that broke the camel's back. Where they're already way overloaded, but it's just to the point where they can get by. So the first response is knowing if that's in your realm of agreement. So in other words, is that something where you are responsible for that? So let's get a example here. So yeah, okay, this is perfect. So um, this I've seen some examples of this recently, and Colin, I will assure you that there are more folks that are on the spectrum working in IT than almost any other industry, and this has been a constant thing where it's just like sometimes nuances are hard to get. So the way to do this is oftentimes to rely on the agreements that your company has as far as handling crises, employees, or sorry, not employees, but trouble tickets and things like that. Because what will happen here is you will be able to just put things into the standards that make sense to you. In other words, it's almost like a fill in the blank kind of thing where you have, okay, this person has this problem, it has this impact, and you're able to nail these things out so that the emotion of it becomes disconnected for you and everyone else. And so you're all speaking the same language there. And trust me, there's nothing easy about this for any of us. I mean, I guess some people have a natural knack for it. Mine was developed over some pain of I just did it right. I tend to laugh off things, right? I tend to not take things as seriously as maybe they should be. And so early on in my career, when I got into bigger enterprise work, I just had a hard time taking things seriously. And for whatever reason, it took a lot of focus on my part to be able to put things into the right perspective of, okay, if I can categorize this properly. And I know that for some of you, that's sounding very, you know, uber geeky or whatever, like overly systematized, but it's true. And so what I was able to do from that is move that even further forward to be able to say, okay, now that I understand how things fit like that, I can start asking the right questions to make sure that my response is measured in the right way. And that's unfortunately something that's very hard to teach, unfortunately. Um, but there's always scenarios. I think of a situation that happened to my wife. She was working at a retail store that sells leather crafting goods. I won't say the place, although there's not a lot of them. But anyway, the situation did happen where a customer was already angry when they walked in the door. Okay, and what happened in the process of that customer being angry is that they looked for ways to stay angry. And so with every passing moment that didn't someone didn't say hi to them or didn't pay attention to them, they got more and more angry. And eventually, my wife, who was on break at the time, came around and uh, saw this was the person was struggling, and said, "Hey, what do you need or whatever?" And this person flew off the handle. So much so that he actually stormed out and made a complaint about my wife to the corporate office, which seems ridiculous. Now, in some circumstances, it might say, "Oh my gosh, what did you say to that person?" That might be the response from the corporate side of things. But the reality is, that person was having a bad day before they came in. And so when it comes to the core question here, as far as like, you know, they'll quit on the spot sort of thing. I can tell another story about this actually, but the bottom line here is that it is not your responsibility to keep people hired or not hired. That's just not what we're here for. And if you're working for a company that doesn't understand that, then maybe it's time for you to quit on the spot. I'm not saying quit on the spot. I'm just saying that there's a balance that has to be reached here and an agreement about what your role is and who takes responsibility for that. And honestly, this is what managers are for, right? We're not literally, but this is a good thing to utilize managers for is someone to step in that circumstance and say, okay, this is going on. So a lot of times, what I'll find is that people will have trouble talking to people in this kind of scenarios, especially when you're not emotional and they are, and you cannot possibly understand why they're emotional because them not being able to print is not something to get bent out of shape about. I'm just giving an example, and so it can be hard sometimes to articulate your misunderstanding of that and not understanding what the crisis is. So sometimes you end up speaking in a much more even tone than they're expecting. They're expecting empathy. They're expecting all these things. It's like it's not your job to give empathy. It's your job to you know fix things, right? So in that particular case, if that's your job to fix things, not be a counselor, then it's a natural thing, and I don't think you should feel bad about that. Now, if you fly off the handle at somebody and say, "Well, the problem is you're just an idiot," okay, maybe that's a good, if they quit because you called them an idiot, that's probably not appropriate, and you probably will be reprimanded for that for sure. But if you didn't do anything wrong in that scenario, um, yeah, it would be a result of a bad agreement if between you and your employer, if that were you were held responsible for that person quitting. By the way, my wife actually did quit that job, and that was one of the things where her company not standing up to her or not standing up for her um, stayed with her, and she still talks about it today. So there's that side of the equation too. That I think people need to be more defensive of their IT teams and not well. I've been talking for the last year about the various traumas that we've been going through as IT folks because it's gotten a little bit worse. I will say, in an instant gratification society, when you have a problem and therefore it's more important than anybody else's problem to you, being not us personally, but to the user, that can become a real stressor, and they will utilize things like threats to try and get you to act. Um, Threats, I put squarely into this area here into three. If you're being threatened by anything, it's almost always that you can pretty much say that that's going to be something that's probably not actually important. If somebody's threatening you with something or threatening an action they'll take that has nothing to do with you, very likely this is something that isn't actually as important as they're trying to make it out to be. And no, that's not always true. Sometimes you have like people that work in sales and whatnot that have a deadline that they're facing, things like that, and so their problem is very important, and sometimes it's legitimately important. But having a way to determine where things fit is a crucial skill set for being able to deal with that, and also getting a second opinion. I'll say that as far as that goes. Um, and oh yeah, so okay, great. So maybe you can convince my wife sometime to actually get more into teaching others how to do leather crafting because she's brilliant at it and she loves teaching, but she is always shy about doing things like online or whatever just to simply teach people what she's doing and stuff like that. So I've been trying to uh, do that sort of thing. But yeah, crafting is something that actually to bring us back up. Um, Quadrant 4 here. A lot of times you things like doing crafting work or cooking, all these kind of things that give you joy, they are it may not seem urgent or important, but honestly, they are really crucial for your survival. So they're wasteful in a good way in terms of that goes. That these are things that actually help you be a more complete and productive person. So absolutely make time for that in your life. Don't avoid that just for the sake of doing other things. Make sure that's still important because it is. It is important to keep the level of enjoyment in life. Otherwise, you'll just always be a victim. We don't want victims. So, all right. So I'm going to move on just because I don't want to go too far over. We're going to go. I think I originally said in 45 or an hour and a half for this. So let's hope we're about right on that. So I said proactive versus reactive. Here's one thing I want to drop off here, and then we'll get into an example. And that concept is what gets scheduled gets done. So what that means is that when you have things written down, you've now made an agreement where none had existed before. Now, specifically in IT services, this can be a real challenge because what happens a lot of times is the opposite of what we want, right? So um, I'm going to approach this with some care here because I think there's a lot of things that fall into this. But um, a couple of years ago, I read a book. It was called The 4 Hour Workweek, which I thought was fascinating as a title, and especially because that's not what he's actually talking about in the book. He's not actually talking about only working 4 hours a week, but whatever. It is one of those things where there are some things in there that I actually took from that I actually implemented in my life. At the time I was reading that, I was a director of technology for a company here in Nashville, and it became really crucial for me to be very protective of my time. So what I started doing was scheduling a time of day that I would be checking email, right? And I told everyone in my company that that is the only times I'm checking email during the day, right? I'm not checking this all day long. You know, if you need something that's urgent for me, do not email me, because that is just a, can be very much a, well, I consider email to be very much a quadrant three activity. It very much is. It can get you sucked in, and especially if you're like me and very obsessed with inbox zero. Yeah, it can get something where you just always want to attack it points every day. Just like, no, I see an email, I got to get rid of it. It's like I have an unread message, I got to get rid of that. I'm just like that personally. But what I'll say is that by setting an expectation of everybody, and then having an agreement that say, okay, I'm only going to check email these certain times in the day. The question to ask yourself when it comes to things like that, whether it's checking email or saying, you know what, I'm going to, work on documentation for this time every day. Do not interrupt me during that time. I won't be doing anything else with you. Those kind of things. They take a bit of courage. And there's a concept, and that concept is, okay, well, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen if you said, I'm going to take 30 minutes of every day and schedule that and not attend anything else, if I have the agreement, obviously, with my coworkers and or boss or whatever works in that scenario, to say, no, this is not negotiable time. This is time that I use for this purpose. Some of the best teams in the world I've ever seen have staggered just things just like that, where they have times of the day where individuals are not available for any kind of responses, because they are focused on specific things. I've seen many projects move forward much more rapidly when the teams do things like that, where they say, you know what, for person one, project implementation time is between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. And then the rest of the day is for support, or other things, that whatever they need to do, right? But those times they're not doing anything except for implementing. And then person two will say, like, between 1 and 4 is their implementation time, and they're not doing anything else. The other person's covering, so they're covering for each other, right? But they're working the implementation and the things that they need to be doing. So those morning scrums don't become a waste of time, because a lot of times they do, right? What they're supposed to be is, hey, what are you working on? What are your blockers? That's it, right? That's the only things that you should be in most morning scrums. But they don't work like that, do they? They're usually, either full on bitch sessions about how awful everything is, or a lot of times they are like, here's all the things we're overwhelmed with, and here's all the things we'll reprioritize our priorities again today. So that, if somebody's not good at these quadrants, by the way, they make a horrible scrum master every single time. And I see that a lot. There's no real good training on this that I see a lot of. Even if there are good trainings on it, a lot of teams, people aren't very good at putting that into action. So, but the concept here is that getting it on your schedule. What gets scheduled gets done. So if something's on your calendar, you're much more likely to do it. So, like for today, I had a couple things on my calendar for today. Not a lot, actually. I have one client that I visited with for about 3 hours this morning. Then I had some preparation time set aside for this, and then I had this, and then I've got another client I'm going to meet with for about an hour, and then gym. I have gym on the calendar here because that's important to put down. Otherwise, hey, maybe I won't do it. I'll find myself distracted with other things. And then after the gym, I've got some projects that I'm working on with this new course that I'm developing in, well, basically just combining the concepts of Citrix and leading practices along with the methodology. And so that's what the course is about. So I'm actually working on some I guess you could call it like a proposal or a value statement, that sort of thing. Trying to refine that enough to send that out to folks and start getting them interested in it as well. So that's what I'm been working on today. And so what I do is I put that on my schedule. And you can do this a couple different ways. We're going to talk about this. Ooh, uh, I should add a task to my day today of mapping this all out. But one of the things we're going to talk about is setting smarter goals, and then actually getting to the point of being able to put those on the calendar in appropriate ways. And those quadrants are a big part of it, right? But basically, you just look at those kind of things as, if it's important enough, and I don't want to be taken into another quadrant, do everything you can to get it on the calendar. That way, it's kind of less negotiable, if not non-negotiable. Um, and another concept here I want to bring up to you is that the this isn't as popular anymore, but the smoke break. I remember early on in my career being kind of upset that I wasn't a smoker because they got to go take breaks like every hour. Sometimes it seemed like even more frequently. There was always just like, "Where's John? Oh, he's out smoking." And so I was like, well, why am I sitting here working the whole time and he's like taking like 15, 20-minute breaks every hour? It was ridiculous. So this sounds weird for me to say this, but I'm also going to suggest that you kind of try and schedule yourself smoke breaks with air fingers quotes, little sanity breaks throughout the day. They don't have to be big, but this is ingrained in our culture. We accept this. Get up out of your chair, or like me, if you have a standing desk, move away from your desk, go somewhere else, go downstairs. If I have the 15 minutes that I think it'll take, I'm going to grab my cat who loves being outdoors, and I'm going to put him in a carrier, and we're going to go sit outside for about 15 minutes just to have that mental break and just some time out there and enjoying the almost 80-degree weather here in Nashville today. And yes, Colin, I do live in Nashville. And here, I'll just put this up for everybody because I would also recommend the National Museum of African American Music. Very good. Actually, I need to go back there. The last time I was in there was about the time of the floods, I believe. So it wasn't really put together fully or something like that. It was something that was going on that was actually had disrupted a lot of the displays. So I think I need to go back and see that again, actually. Anyway, as an aside. So I do intend to do that today as a break, just to get away for a little bit and then come back and work on my schedule. So take a smoke break. We'll talk more about these kind of nuances in a later time. We'll talk about focus times and things like that, and the importance of taking breaks, even when you have focus times where you feel like you keep going. Sometimes it is important to know when to take a break and come back and refocus. So anyway, as we're going along here, what I want to do do the last part of this, and I don't think I have this ready. I was going to do a got the wrong thing here. Pardon me a moment while I grab the trusty old tablet here and get this actually pulled up. But I wanted to go through an exercise with you of defining our quadrants, right? Oh boy. Yep, always something, right? Um, the exercise I want you to go through while I'm putting this up is to get to a point where you are able to define your quadrant areas on a daily basis. So it's like think of this as almost like a journal, but not quite a journal, right? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share this, and I'm going to take that away, so I don't need it. Take that away, we don't need it. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to separate this into multiple quadrants, and I highly recommend you take a piece of paper or multiple pieces of paper and do this every day until you're good at this and you can recognize activities that are in your right quadrants right here. So let's just simply draw a quadrant here, right? Okay. And so you have up here, you have urgent. And over here, you have non-urgent. And then over here, you have not important on the bottom left-hand side. And then you have important. And yeah, handwriting with the tablet. It's always a good decision, right? So you have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. Okay. So, oh, hey, I want us to quick shout out to somebody I was just talking about, I think yesterday. Steven, how's it going, man? I am well. Thanks for asking. I hope you're well as well. We're actually, yeah. So that's cool. So anyway, as far as the quadrants go, what I want you to do is take some time out of every day to say, okay, today, how much time did I spend in activities that were in all these quadrants? So the way you do this is you start making a list of the activities you did each day. So let's say um, you had well, I'll walk you through some of mine, and we'll put these into the right places. So I began today with a 4 hour consulting meeting. Whereas where would I put that on my list? So it was scheduled, right? It was something that was actually supposed to be happening. Um, the other part about this is that it was important because it was um, something where it's not only my livelihood, but it's an agreement that I had to do this, but also because from that why perspective we talked about last time is very much I am wanting this project to succeed, not just because they'll pay me to do it, but because I want this to be successful, kind of on their behalf. So where would we put this particular um, thing on the quadrant? Where would we put this activity? You can put it in the chat, or I'll give you like 30 seconds to get this while I take a drink of water. Okay, if you said quadrant 2, that would be right. So I'll say client 1 meeting 4 hours. Okay. Now, during this meeting, I got an email. Now, how do I know this? Well, because I broke one of the rules I just told you about. I had my email open and it dinged, and I looked over at it and saw that someone sent me an email. This email had some questions. I'm not I'm going to sound irritated because I slightly am, but it's okay. I figured out what was going on. This person had a question about something that I had answered in a status update last Friday, right? So I was at first a little miffed, and it caught me off guard a little bit. It's like, why is this person asking this? They should know. It turns out that they actually weren't on the email that I sent out on Friday, so it was actually my fault. So in a way, I'm glad I did this. But um, where would we classify this? It was something that was something they needed for a presentation they were giving that needed to prep tonight. So it was something that wasn't really difficult, but it was something they needed it at that moment. But it was part of a status update that several other people saw, right? So where would we classify that? I'm going to say that we're going to put that in quadrant 3. So we'll say presentation email. Now, this only took about uh, a minute or so to actually get done with, right? Why did I put it in quadrant 3? It's because someone else could have responded to this. I knew almost immediately that someone else could have done that. The only reason I actually did respond is because it was kind of a lull in the conversation with the client anyway. And so I was like, well, it's going to be okay if I just go ahead and forward the email that had the status update. It was a quick thing that I could do. It was a matter of just a quick thing. So under a minute to determine what the problem was, not only determine I was at fault, but also, do that. But now, why quadrant 3 in that regards? And it's because other people could have done the same thing. That could have easily been delegated to someone else. Now, if that was something that was actually important and had that urgency to it, I could put it in quadrant 1. But in this particular case, it wasn't really important. It was something that, like I said, somebody else could have done it. So to me, it wasn't important. So that's why I put that kind of activity in quadrant 3. Um, And then I will just say, I'm just going to call this the evil inbox zero. If you're not familiar with this term, it means that you are trying to get to the point where you've read through all your messages, you've processed everything, and you are at a zero. So, how many times do I do this during a day? How much time does it take? Um, this is where you need to be honest with yourself. This is where you need to be very, very honest and say, well, gosh, that actually did take me a good half hour to go through. So maybe I said 30 minutes. And again, if there's one thing I know about doing things like this is it's very hard for us to judge the amount of time we're taking on an activity, right? It's very difficult sometimes. So it's very much you have to be honest with yourself and take yourself accountable. And if you know you're going to have that kind of activity, put a timer on it and actually watch yourself. And that's what doesn't get measured can't be improved, right? So honestly, sometimes it does take that um, dropping the pride and actually saying, well, I'm not going to assume I spent this much time. I'm actually going to measure it. So it might not have been 30 minutes today, but I know in the past on a Monday that it's taken easily that much. There may also be things like um, uh, status updates or things like that that need to go out. So I will say in some cases, there will be email responses. I can spell. Not that you're really seeing that all that well anyway. But regardless, email responses. How much time do I spend on that? Well, let's say that the email responses in this case was um, 10 minutes to find what was needed for all of them, get those back out the door. And trust me when I tell you that when it comes to sending out email responses, that is absolutely a criteria that I use to determine. I say, okay, is this something I need to answer right now or not? And lots of ways to do this. There's a flag for follow-up kind of functionality that like Outlook and others have. Sometimes I will just open it up in a new tab or a new window. There's various ways to handle this of saying, okay, I do need to do this, but I need to do this later. And so I can put that into either quadrant 3 or 2, depending on the importance of it, right? Um, so I can move those if I need to. Or in some cases, it might be something where it is somebody who needs help with something, and I've got another person that I can delegate that to. And so my only quadrant one activity is the process of delegating that to someone else, making sure it's going to get done, but not something that I need to worry about. And so that delegatable thing. So you're kind of getting rid of that demand and necessity problem, right? So you're actually getting that off your plate as rapidly as possible. So spending as little time there as possible. So, but it does take some time, right? It's not like we can say it's going to be a zero amount of time in a day that is urgent and important, right? So even though I like to avoid that quadrant, not impossible. So anyway, let's do some activities. So I've got another client meeting. It's going to be an hour long. And I'm going to put this in a different category, believe it or not. And that is because we are coming up to the end of the project here. And this is something that is kind of a courtesy at this point. I just want to make sure they understand something, but it's not necessarily important. Um, but it is all coming up to the end of the project. And so if it's going to be done, it does need to be done now. So interestingly enough, I'm going to put this in quadrant 3. So I'm going to say client 2 meeting. So now we're up to an hour and 31 minutes in our quadrant 3. Not ideal, but it's something where if I didn't have other things, if I didn't have a gap today, then I wouldn't have said yes to this as the way that works. Because right now I am in absolutely a quadrant 2 activity, and that is the live broadcast. Why is it quadrant 2? That is because there was a specific timeline that this was to be done because it's live. If this was just a recording, I could have been done at any time, but it's still important. So it could be considered as urgent because it's has to be happening. It's happening live. However, I could cancel. It's not like it had to be done. It's not an urgent kind of thing. If I had something else coming up, believe me, I would have said, "Hey, we're rescheduling. Sorry." So in that regards, it was non-urgent. It doesn't require me to go beyond my capabilities to deliver what I need to deliver. At the same time, it is very important to me, and I want to be, like I said before, a person who's giving back, and so that's why I'm doing all this, right? So that's a big thing about this is it's very important. So I classify it as that. Now the preparation for this, I did actually run into something that I will admit. I mentioned that this weekend I actually spent some time just sitting there watching the History Channel, right? So what I didn't do this weekend is prep an outline for this. So there came a point where something was very important and urgent, and so I will say live prep. This happened. That's why I was so flustered at first. It's because I actually was just getting done with a live prep right before this, and kind of multitasking. But still, we're still going to give the credit here. So this was I'm going to say about 20 minutes. Just because I had things in mind already. It was just about getting them in an outline and then getting the graphics up on the screen like I was doing earlier. So so I would put that as a an urgent but important activity. It's kind of unfortunate that wasn't I didn't have that in a non-urgent thing, but if I was going to be ready in time, it had to be done, right? So that was that made it an urgent and important activity in quadrant one. So you'll notice here that I don't have anything in quadrant four, but I wanted to give another quadrant two activity. Um, and that is well, and this is something where I actually struggle with this, like everybody else. There's no perfect answers here. So going to the gym, would I classify that as a quadrant two activity or quadrant four activity? And that's where I would put that, because going to the gym is, I don't see how that can ever be urgent unless you left your wallet there. It's not going to be an urgent activity, right? You don't need to be there. So it's really just whether it's important to you. Now, here's where things get a little weird, because what we're going to say is in my case, I have kind of an integrated life, and so I will oftentimes do the gym as a quadrant two activity. In other words, it's important to me, but it's not urgent. Now, I'll just put a question mark here, and I'll just say, or should it be here in the kind of the more um, required but not required time that's not really urgent or important to the business? Um, there's some arguments to be made here. In fact, one of the things I'm finding this year is that my physical fitness has become absolutely crucial to the success of my business. So it is very much something to focus in on. So what I want you to, but anyway, that's where you can kind of classify that on your own, and it could be either one, right? So it's really just where it fits. Now, what I will say about this is most likely I'm keeping this here in quadrant four, and there's a reason for that. That is because a lot of times to make the monies, I need to be focused on things that are in those other quadrants that are important. So, like, say for example, if somebody has pinged me while we've been in this broadcast and I've not been checking my email, that they really need to meet with me if it's important enough, or that I think, it's something I can make the time for and push the gym to another time, then I'll absolutely put that, into that spot that I have currently for the gym and just move the gym down in priority because it's a quadrant four activity. Um, I'll also put like watching Thrivecast here, or listening to the up and coming, thriving in IT podcast, coming soon to a player near you. These are activities that aren't necessarily important or urgent, but they are things that enrich you and make you a better and more whole person. So, for example, reading Just Do This Shameless self plug. I love it. But anyway, these are kind of activities where, if you don't know, that's my book on IT methodology that, that I referenced earlier. But or even listening. We'll say listening because you can get the audiobook and listen while you do other things. And by the way, just really quick, since I'm going to have a minute here and not too much more than that, but Colin says music is definitely something that having a soundtrack. My life is a soundtrack. It's one of those things where I have a kind of a blessing and a curse where I'm hearing music all the time, and a lot of times it's not actually music that's been created. And so that's one of the weird little curse things I have. So a lot of times I will force myself to listen to other music just to keep focused on other things and I'm not distracted by what's in my head. Yeah, a little notion about myself, but we'll talk in a couple of, I believe in week 3, we'll talk more about the focus, how to focus better. And we'll talk about, in fact, what I'm hoping to be able to do, it's a fingers crossed kind of a thing, is that I'll be able to do basically a productivity session with you and I'll be able to walk you through all this. So it won't be an interact. It won't be very much me talking. It'll be very much me, showing you how I work. So we'll do a little bit of that in a hopefully in a couple weeks. So let me pull this up to a close here. Yep. I said it and instinctively pushed the wrong button for the actual closing. So I'm glad I didn't actually have any kind of automation that closed the actual broadcast itself. But I wanted to take a moment and do a little bit of reflection here as far as the what's going on with these quadrants and how to do this in your life and why it's important. So it really is important for you to be in control of this because this really is how to keep from being a victim. It is absolutely breaking my heart right now how many people are telling me that they're feeling very much like they want to stop, they want to quit. I've been through this last year. Let me get off of this. Look back to myself here. I very much wanted to quit. I did quit, essentially. Those of you that have been following me for a while, you know that last year I pretty much did the silent quit thing on a lot of what I was doing. All my posts became very much automated, so I wasn't disappeared completely, but as far as it goes, they were all automated. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't interacting, wasn't helping. I wasn't doing much consulting work. I was very depressed. Just wasn't in a good spot. It wasn't until I really sat down and said, what do I really want? What is my why with this? What do I really care about? That I really got to the point where I could actually point to not just a success, but of saying, okay, I'm not just doing this because I was told to do it. I'm not just doing this just to make money. I'm doing this because, dang it, I care about this stuff. That right there is one of the most crucial things that you can have in your life, is to care and care enough to take proactive action on that. And that is absolutely what I want you to be doing with all this. That's why I want you to take this quadrant and say, honestly, with yourself every single day, okay, how can I get more and more and more into quadrant 2? For me, it becomes much more natural because I can align my why with these kind of things. I know that's a challenge for a lot of you out there. I know this because I talk to so many of you every single day. So I want to encourage you. It's absolutely possible. It's absolutely plausible. All you need to do is step up and take these actions. Absolutely, your life will change for the better. I guarantee it. I've never seen anybody who has taken the effort to actually nail all this down, how their day looks, and they haven't had the immediate response of being able to say, I am in control of my life. Not just my schedule, my life. I hope that means something to you today. I hope you will take this and move it on forward in your life so that you can be not only a better employee, not only a better person that works, but someone who is just genuinely well suited for your life, the way you want your life to be. All right, guys, I need to end for today because I need to get to another appointment that I promised myself to. Got another quadrant activity coming up. So anyway, I hope you got something great out of today. And I do want you to encourage you to leave this world a little bit better than you found it. But first, remember, we've got another one that's coming up very soon. So until next time, my name is DJ Eshelman. It was great to be with you here today. And thanks all. We'll get some questions next time, I promise.